Hi, this is a review for The Case of the Crimson Kiss. This is a novella by Earl Gardner, starring Detective Perry Mason. And I'd never heard of Perry Mason before reading this story. I mean, I'd heard of him. I knew there was a TV show, but I didn't know anything about Perry Mason. But this was a great novella. It was actually really good, and now I want to read all the Perry Mason stuff. I wish I'd found out about this in high school and I'd read like all these cool mystery novels instead of reading angry literature. Yeah, that's mostly what I did in high school. I was really angry as a teenager. Just mopey and angry all the time. Okay, so the story is that Faye Allison, she just got engaged. You know, her boyfriend proposed, and she's so happy she doesn't notice that her roommate is seething with anger. Anita goes upstairs. They're in an apartment complex, so she goes up to room 702 where she meets her secret boyfriend. He's this wealthy playboy. She's like, "Why haven't you proposed?" And he feeds her a line about having to wrap up his divorce with his wife. He promises to meet her outside in 10 minutes. Well, he promises to meet her outside in 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, she comes back. She finds him dead. He was drinking alcohol, so poisoned alcohol, cyanide in the alcohol, and there's a kiss on his forehead. So Anita, you know, if somebody killed my significant other, I would try to figure out who did it, right? Anita doesn't care. Her only thought is that this is a great opportunity to frame her hated roommate. And that's exactly what she does. She drugs her roommate, then she moves her roommate's stuff up to the apartment and moves all of her stuff away from the apartment. Then she drugs herself to finish the frame. And the police totally buy it. They think that she's an innocent victim. Now, unfortunately for her, Perry Mason and his assistant Della Street manage to show up because they're friends with Faye's aunt. And Faye's aunt just comes in. She sees they were knocked out, so she calls in Perry Mason. And, you know, he investigates. It's kind of a weird thing because they see the key to apartment 702 and then they go into the apartment. A lot of things happen in quick succession here. So basically they ring the doorbell. An angry neighbor comes out and tells them off. So they go into the room, they find the corpse. Perry's like, "Ah, crap, we've got another murder mystery." And so they leave, but as they're leaving, a group of 4 people show up, and they ring the doorbell, and then the angry neighbor yells at them again. And then also the victim's wife shows up, like 10, 20 minutes later, because, hey, he has, 9 different visitors on the night he was murdered? Why not, huh? And Perry does make a weird decision here. That key, he puts it in an envelope and mails it to himself. That way when the police show up and ask about the key, he says, "Hey, I don't have the key to the apartment." And it's actually a clue that there is no key. The victim didn't have a key on him. So presumably the murderer stole the key from the crime scene or something. How did the victim get into the apartment? How did the murderer get into the apartment if there was no key? That's sort of a clue. But Perry Mason took a key and mailed it to himself. It's like he's interfering with the investigation. I thought that was weird. And, he puts a lot of work trying to figure out how to prove Faye's innocence. And he's basically forced to go into this case blind. And it's an interesting trial. When the trial starts, that's when the story gets super good. I'm like, yes, this is amazing. And I'm not surprised that the author was a lawyer in real life because it's just so well done. This entire thing is like Law and Order, except they don't have the detectives and the lawyers separated. They're together. It's the same guy. He's a detective lawyer. So I thought it was great. Really good. I loved it. So, I'm probably gonna have to get into spoiler territory here. Yeah. So let me just skip to the spoiler territory. So what Perry Mason does is with like the third witness, who's the next door neighbor, she says she was really grumpy because she just moved in that day. Also, the 4 people that came in, they say someone was in the room. That person buzzed them into the apartment around the time that Perry Mason would have been inside the victim's apartment. So putting the clues together, Perry solves the case. So what he actually does is he takes a notebook and smashes it against the neighbor's face to get her lip prints, and he asks the identification expert to examine the prints. they're a match. The neighbor is the murderer. And Perry basically figured out, because we had like these 3 different groups of people visit the room very quickly. So the murderer must have been Eric. The murderer buzzed them in. And then the murderer left immediately after Perry Mason comes in, and then he leaves immediately. And immediately after that, the 4 people showed up. So all these people in very quick succession. That meant the murderer had no place to hide. There wasn't enough time, unless the murderer is going into a nearby apartment. And Perry's like, wait a minute, so she just bought this apartment this day, and she paid a lot of money for the apartment that day. That's what aroused his suspicions. Turns out she is the killer because she was the victim's other secret girlfriend. Yeah, he had multiple secret girlfriends. She wanted to surprise him. When she found out he had more than one secret girlfriend, she was furious, and that's when she decided to kill him. And yeah, overall, I thought it was a great mystery story. I really like this Perry Mason. He seems interesting. His assistant was really interesting, too. The characters, I don't know if it's just me, but it seemed like the other characters thought Perry Mason was in love with his detective assistant secretary. She's a secretary. But she is more like a detective assistant. She really helps out in the case. So Della, they sort of were like making veiled references. Like the prosecution's like, oh, your charming and very efficient secretary just happened to be on the scene. And I'm like, okay, objection. My love life is not on the trial here. And there's also a really good joke with the prosecution, too, because Perry Mason tries to make a point that nobody saw him use the key on the apartment. You know, nobody saw him do it because his back was to the witness. And the prosecution is like, fine, you've made your point. You know, it could be that you were holding the key in your mouth the whole time, not using your hands. And that was actually pretty funny. Okay. So overall, good story. I give it a thumbs up. Want to read more Perry Mason someday. Maybe I'll check out the TV series. Who knows?